under this government is becoming a crisis. It has never been less affordable in the history of our country to get into the housing market. The legacy of the Liberal government is flat wages. Flat wages for 8 years at the same time as we have had housing prices and the cost of housing affordability in this country skyrocket. Flat wages, price of housing increasing. The gap in housing affordability has never been bigger in the history of Australia. It is harder to get into the housing market now than it has ever been in the history of our great country. And why is it important, Acting Speaker? Why is it important that Australians can get into the housing market? Because if you retire, your net worth on average, the median net worth of people who are able to get into the housing market in Australia is $980,000. $980,000 in assets, net worth, if you're able to have some sort of property asset in this country. But if you don't, that number is $40,000. It is a great wealth creator in this country. Housing and property is a great way for Australians to find financial security in retirement. But under this government, what we have seen is that fewer and fewer Australians are able to have this opportunity in their working lives to secure their financial future and to be able to retire with the amount of financial security that Australians deserve. And who is this affecting the most? It is affecting Australian women. The highest growing cohort of homeless Australians are women over 55. And if you look at some of the structural inequalities in our economy, it is clear to see what is driving that. Women are working for less. The gender pay gap has not been closed under this government. They are working in lower paid industries, more generally, services-based industries. And they are also taking breaks from the workforce obviously for child. They're doing more than their fair share of looking after kids, but also caring responsibilities. Australian women are doing more than men in caring for families and taking breaks from their employment, which means superannuation is being reduced. So what's this government's response to some of the structural inequalities of flatlining wages, of women unable to get into the housing market, unable to find safe and secure housing? Well, this government says we're not even going to try and fix the wages flatlining. We saw last night in the budget that this government is content with flat wages over the forward estimates. They don't want to see wages increase. They don't want to see the gap between what Australians earn and what they can afford in housing to close. What this government has presided over is that gap widening between what Australians can afford and what Australians are earning, and the cost of housing. And of course, when it comes to superannuation, what do they desperately want you to do? They want you to raid your superannuation to put it into housing. Now, what that's going to do is bump up the cost of housing, and it's also going to leave more and more Australians, especially Australian women, with less retirement savings when they retire.
Terrible idea.
Housing affordability is a crisis in this country. But as more and more people are unable to enter into the housing market, it's pushing more and more people into the rental market. The cost of rental is becoming more and more in this country. 40% of renters in this country are paying more than 30% of their income into rent, which is causing financial stress. Australians are paying more than they can afford to live in the rental market, which is a real problem because at the other end of the scale, in the social housing market, only less than 1% of people who are on the job seeker allowance can afford to be in the private rental market. And the government last night talks about all of these incentive programs. Look how great we're doing housing affordability. What they are doing is a drop in the ocean. There are 200,000 people in Australia who are on the social housing wait list. There are hundreds of thousands of Australians who are facing rental stress. Less than 40% of people who are at the age of 30 can get into the housing market. Housing affordability under this government is becoming a crisis. It has never been less affordable in the history of our country to get into the housing market. And what we're seeing is more of the same marketing and spin. What we need is to attack supply, attack the amount of houses out there and make housing more affordable for everyday Australians.